Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to finally pot up the Philodendron Giganteum cuttings. It was about 3 to 4 weeks ago when I first put them on this wall over here in my kitchen, and I really didn't expect them to root out or grow those fresh roots as fast as they did, but within that short amount of time, they sure did. And it was because of their aerial roots sprouting off inside that water propagation that allowed them to grow those new roots. So today, we are going to get to work. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to start with 2 cuttings and put them into one of these 3 pots. I'm just very indecisive when it comes to potting, so that's going to be the challenge. And I'm going to go with these 2 cuttings because they have grown the longest roots, and not only that, but the roots have gotten so long that they're actually peeking out of the top of this water vessel. So that's what we're going to do, and it should be an interesting little potting experiment. Now, the thing about Philodendron Giganteum that I love is their massive leaves. These leaves out in nature can grow to be 2 feet long. The plant itself is a climber and grows several feet tall. It climbs up the side of a tree down in its natural habitat. Its natural habitat is the Caribbean. So in order to really kind of care for these plants, it's important that you kind of mimic an atmosphere like that for them to thrive, to get those big leaves. My plant grew so quickly once I gave it the proper environment that it needed, that it was just time to really cut it up because I just didn't have the space anymore. I'm thinking what I'm going to do is probably go with terracotta because philodendron, especially ones like the Giganteum, they really love having loose soil, the good chunky aroid mix of like cocoa coir, perlite, some regular soil inside there as well, and also, some good nutrients because these are heavy feeders during the growing season. They like to be fed about like 1 to 2 times a month. So it's important to give them those good nutrients that are found in a lot of chunky aroid mix. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a little base layer of our potting mixture, just enough to kind of allow the plant to take root inside there. Mind you, these were aerial roots that initially started the growth spurt of these new white roots inside here, but they are going to do just fantastic inside this soil. And you can see just how long these roots had gotten in a short amount of time, in those 3 to 4 week span that I put them up and cut them up. And so this guy is ready. And just to be on the safe side, like I do when I'm potting up any cuttings, I like to take some rooting hormone, which you can find pretty much like at any plant store, or you can find it, I found it at Home Depot, at Lowe's. It's usually in with the soil products. And what this does is it just kind of allows the roots to be a little bit healthier and take root inside the potting mixture, which of course is what we want. And so I'm just gonna like dab them a little bit so they're covered in it. It's kind of like cooking food in a sense, if you're making like, let's say I'm gonna use the best example ever, shake and bake. Consider this like the shake and bake and the plant like the pork chop. That's right, I'm just referring to plants as pork chops. So I'm going to allow for this root and just kind of like try not to touch them because I don't want to disturb them, because that is not what you want to have happened. But I just want to tuck it down a little bit just so it can have some room to crawl around inside this soil once it's potted up. And I'll probably need to water this once a week while it's gaining momentum and turning into its own plant. But in the meantime, what I will do after that is probably only need to water it maybe once every 2 weeks once it's established itself, just because we're in the colder months, especially here in Colorado, where temperature is supposed to dip down to, I believe it's like 0 to -15 with the wind chill tonight. This after a string of like 50-degree days, but that is Colorado for you. And somehow these tropical plants are thriving here. I'm going to try to tuck this in and around So I want them to kind of grow side by side. And what I'll eventually need to do is that once this plant starts to establish itself, I'll eventually need to put in another moss pole, which I initially had the mother plant growing on, just so the plant can start climbing up something, thinking that it's a tree, and that'll allow for healthier and faster growth, especially if I want more big new leaves to start sprouting out of this new plant. And one of these cuttings is actually the top cutting from my initial mother plant, and so it already has the growth point where the next new leaf will eventually start coming out at. So what I'm going to start to do is start filling this up with some soil, and it's important that we make sure while we're doing this process that we shake the pot around just so the plant and the soil goes around the roots and doesn't really just kind of, focus on like one general area, because you want to make sure that this is going to be covered up, because these roots are really long. But the thing is, and you're probably wondering, well, if they're long, why don't I use a bigger pot? See, philodendrons like this one really, really love being root bound. And what I mean by that is they like when their roots are wrapped up in like a tight area like this, where they struggle to kind of move around and do their own little thing. And so that makes it a little bit easier. And I'll know that I'll need to repot this, let's say come springtime, once the roots start growing out of the bottom of the pot. These roots are, I'll tell you what, they are giving me this struggle today. Okay, I'm gonna try to cover them up with soil. Normally I don't like touching the roots like this, but I have no option with like how long these are. Let's see. There we go. Yeah, and I've only found this really at one plant store. I got this mother plant about a year ago, I want to say, at Reroot here in Denver. And I didn't have like the craziest of growing conditions or climbing conditions for it at the time, but even without them, I'll tell you, it was a fairly easy to care for plant. Never gave me any issues in regular conditions, and it's a really great plant, especially if you're looking to fill up like an empty space in your home, because it just grows and grows and grows. And like you can see, I mean, these leaves are so massive that they just kind of like fill up a space. And it's really neat because it does kind of give your home those jungle type vibes like a monstera would, or other philodendron or other Araceae genus and species. Araceae being the family of plants like what monstera, philodendron, even like pothos, epiprenum come from. And yeah, they're really beautiful. They're actually called, they go by another nickname too, of like, usually it's alocasia that go by like elephant ears, because they have big massive leaves as well, and they're also an aroid. But this plant is also nicknamed the Philodendron Giganteum elephant ears, because these massive leaves, I mean, they look like elephant ears, right? All right, so we officially have our plant, our brand new plant, potted up. And I really don't like using so much soil, but I really needed to jam in those roots because they were just starting to pop up. And I could tell because when they were growing inside these water vessels, the roots were already starting to come outside of there. So, all right, now that we have it, what we're going to do is we're now going to water it. And so I'm going to put in my sink. And I like to water all my plants with filtered water. That's just preference. Rainwater, if you're allowed to get it, would be optimal because plants thrive in it. In fact, here in Colorado, it was like illegal to actually collect rainwater up until I think it was like 2016, which seems kind of random and strange, and that, it's not probably true, but it is. And that's kind of crazy. But people now collect their rainwater here because plants just love it. They thrive in it because that's what they're used to out of nature. And so now that we have it all watered up, I'm just gonna let it kind of leak out of the side there. And I need to find out or come up with an idea of what exactly I'm going to put up there cuttings-wise to replace it, because the cuttings had filled such an empty spot on my kitchen wall here for the last couple of weeks. And I really got used to seeing these elephant ears up there. These beautiful Giganteum elephant ears. I'll tell you, philodendron, they're just so easy to care for, and they're hands down like my favorite genus of plant. And they're just so beautiful. So look, just like that, we now have a brand new plant once it's done leaking moisture out of the bottom of its pot. So that's how we ended up propagating over this period of a couple of weeks and turning this into a new plant. And that's where the new leaf will come out of, from this leaf right here. That's where the growth point was in the top cutting. And I'll make sure to keep you guys updated. As always, I so appreciate you guys watching my channel. And if you haven't already, please subscribe or hit the like button. It really helps out a lot. Until the next video, I'll see you guys next time.